are going to be learning about adverb clauses today. Hopefully this is review for you. It was covered in 7th grade here. If you've forgotten though, this will be a nice little refresher. I'm going to try and speed through it a little bit. You can always pause and rewind if you need to review something, okay? First of all, let's go over what an adverb clause is. So an adverb clause is a subordinating conjunction plus an independent clause. That's all it takes, okay? Subordinating conjunction plus an independent clause creates a clause that does the same job as an adverb does, answers those same questions, okay? So for instance, after is a subordinating conjunction. Miss Naylor made the video is an independent clause that can stand alone. When I put them together, it makes an adverb clause. After Miss Naylor made the video. Now, here's something important. That's not a complete sentence. It doesn't express a complete thought because that subordinate conjunction makes it not. So that's what subordinating conjunctions do. They take independent clauses and make them incomplete thoughts, okay? There are lots and lots of subordinating conjunctions. These are my favorites: after, although, as, while, when, until, before, because, if, and since. I've memorized them, so all I have to think is a wubis, and I remember what all those letters stand for. If you needed some more, which you will for what you're about to do, English Workshop, page 165 is a great place to go. It has a list of common subordinating conjunctions, or you might go on your iPad and take a look, search for list of subordinating conjunctions. There are a lot of them though, and you need to be familiar with them. I would suggest having a few that you kind of get stuck in your brain like I have here, these 10, but there are a lot more than just 10, okay? So we use adverb clauses to make complex sentences. All that takes is taking an adverb clause and attaching it to an independent clause. And we use them when we want to put more emphasis on the independent clause. So, for instance, after Miss Naylor makes the video, she waited an hour to finish processing. So, I have my subordinate conjunction at the beginning here, then I have my independent clause, and when I put them together, it makes an adverb clause, right? So subordinate conjunction, independent clause, put them together, you get an adverb clause. And then I have another independent clause. She waited an hour for it to finish processing. This brings up something kind of important. So I have compound versus complex sentences, and they're really different in the jobs that they do. So when we look at a compound sentence, it's like a wedding, okay? You have two people who are in love and they get married, but they're both adults and they are both perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. They're both independent, okay? So a compound sentence is made of two independent clauses. A complex sentence doesn't work the same way, okay? Let's go back. Because I've added this subordinate conjunction, my first clause can't stand alone. So it's like the baby. It's the dependent clause. It can no longer take care of itself. It has to have help. And that's where the independent clause, the mom or dad, comes into play, right? So that's when I add, she waited an hour for it to finish processing. Now I have a complete sentence because I express a complete thought, okay? So that's helpful when you're trying to remember which is which might come up later this year when we're reviewing and you might have like a quiz or a test perhaps. You might want to know this, right? Compound sentences, 2 equals. Complex sentence, kind of like a parent and child. You've got a dependent and an independent, okay? We create complex sentences with adverb clauses in 3 different structures. The first one, you start with an adverb clause, you have a comma, and you have an independent clause. Now remember that adverb clause is made of 2 parts, a subordinate conjunction and an independent clause. That's how we make an adverb clause, okay? So while Mrs. Burleson finished the conference, subordinate conjunction, independent thought, right? I put them together and now I have an adverb clause that can't stand alone. The next student patiently waited in the hallway, period. I've added this independent clause, so now this can stand alone. This whole sentence is capable of standing up. That's the first pattern that we see, or the first structure. You do want to make notes here. So we've got, again, an adverb clause has 2 parts, the subordinate conjunction and the independent clause. When it starts a sentence, it has to have a comma, and then it's followed by an independent clause. Our next structure is when the adverb clause shows up in the middle of the sentence, as in like stuck in between stuff, okay? So the way this happens is I might start my sentence with the subject of my independent clause, and I'm using the same sentence down here. I've just rearranged the pieces to make this really clear, okay? Then I have my adverb clause, and then I follow it with the predicate of the independent clause. And you'll see I have to have 2 commas then, one before my adverb clause and one after my adverb clause. So here I go. The next student, whoops. The next student, right here, right? That's the same as the subject of the independent clause, all right? While Mrs. Burleson finished the conference, there's my adverb clause again, patiently waited in the hallway. There's that predicate, right? So this one has to have 2 commas because I'm actually putting something in between the subject and verb of another sentence, and that's really important. It's all the same pieces. I've used the same exact pieces as my first example, but I've rearranged them in this new structure, okay? All right, and our third structure. We put the adverb clause at the end of the sentence. Now again, we have our independent clause followed by an adverb clause. An adverb clause is made up of a subordinate conjunction and an independent clause, right? They can't stand alone because it has that subordinate conjunction. But notice that there's no comma here. When you put the adverb clause as the last part of the sentence, it doesn't get a comma, okay? So, the next student patiently waited in the hallway while Mrs. Burleson finished the conference. No comma. So, structure 1, adverb clause at the beginning gets 1 comma after the adverb clause. Structure 2 gets 2 commas around the adverb clause because it's stuck in the middle of a sentence, right? And then structure 3, no commas because the adverb clause is at the end. All right, now there are 3 things you need to do. First of all, on the back of your notes, I want you to go ahead and write 1 sentence of each of those patterns where we have an adverb clause in a complex sentence, okay? So one where the adverb clause is at the very beginning, one where the adverb clause is in the middle, and one where the adverb clause is at the end. Then you're going to go through and you're going to mark all of the subordinate conjunctions in your essay, and you're going to verify that each is part of a complex sentence. I've found a few papers where we have adverb clauses where people have treated them like sentences, and they're not. They can't stand alone. So if you have it as part of a complex sentence, excellent. If it's not part of it's not part of a bigger thing. If it doesn't have an independent clause to hold it up, then it's a fragment, and you need to fix that because you'll lose points, and that won't make you happy. Okay. You also need to make sure that the adverb clauses that are in complex sentences are correctly punctuated. So there should never be a comma before if it's at the very end of the sentence, right? It should have 2 commas if you've stuck it in the middle. It should have 1 comma if you put it at the beginning of that sentence, okay? Best of luck, ask questions if you have them, and I can't wait to see your excellent complex sentences. I want to see at least 1 of each pattern in your paper, all right? Thanks.